Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes, here.
Mrs. Lynn?
Here.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Here.
Dr. Huntington?
Here.
Mr. Coffey?
Here.
Mrs. Stiff?
Here.
Mr. Kennedy?
Here. Please rise for the pledge. We'll have our ROTC come up.
Art time. Art. Right turn. Art. Color art. Halt. Post. Post. Colors. Present. Arms.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Colors. Post. Art time. Art. Right turn. Art. Forward. Art.
You may be seated. Big thank you to our ROTC. They're always fantastic. I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have here in person, as well as those who are tuned in on live stream. At this time, do we have any public comment on an agenda item?
No, we do not.
And since we do not, let's move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve and any possible amendments?
I move to amend the approval of the consent agenda with the removal of the Hopewell schools from the check register.
Do we have a second for that amended motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve the rest?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Abstain.
All right, motion passes. We're going to be moving on to recognition and awards for band, orchestra, and choir. I'm excited about this. I am a new orchestra dad. My son is doing orchestra this year. So some of the awards I saw on there, excited for you guys, but I will turn it over to Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Carl Parker and our board members who will be help passing out awards.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, it is our pleasure to honor JTHS student musicians who have been selected to the 2024 Illinois Music Education Association, also known as ILMEA, District 1 Band, Choir, and Orchestras. To attain these honors, the students submitted audition videos to the ILMEA, which are meticulously reviewed by a panel of experienced musicians. Only the most outstanding audition performances earn the privilege of participating in the district music festivals. This is a tremendous honor, showing not only their amazing musical talents, but also a strong commitment to their craft. So I would like to begin with the Joliet Central members. First, for District 1 Band, we have Natalie Medina for flute. If you can come up, please. I always forget to do that. District 1 Chorus, Lauren Barrios, soprano 2. Maximiliano Sainz, bass 2. Jimmy Sanchez, bass 2. And for District 1 Orchestra, Rocco Jones for cello. I would also like to thank and congratulate the directors. We have Mr. Joshua Massey, the Director of Choirs, Mr. Peter Lapari, Director of Orchestras, and Mr. Don Stinson, Director of Bands. I'm not sure if they were able to make it, but I want to
Invite any family members who would like to come up and take pictures. Certainly may.
Congratulations.
Oh, wait, we got somebody. Wait, oh.
Sorry, I just got out of work.
You're always doing something.
Natalie Medina.
Perfect time that was.
I know, that's it, perfect timing.
Congratulations.
We are also very proud of our musicians and our singers who have qualified for this distinguished honor from Joliet West. And the Illinois Music Education Association Band 1, District 1 Band members for the 24 is Mallory Berry on clarinet. Catherine Governor for bassoon. Christian Toth for trombone. And Claire Wellman for piccolo and flute. And we too acknowledge our band directors. We have with us tonight Mr. Eric Wellman. He's the director of bands. You have to come up, Mr. Wellman. And Miss Allison Ballman, the assistant director of bands, if she's here. Joining them this year for District 1 Chorus is Vera Barabo, soprano 2. Charlotte Dean for soprano 1. Holly Holt for alto 1. Leandro Maggot for tenor 1, yes. Gracie Mitchell for alto 1. Katie Mongelli for alto 2. Sierra Rapata for alto 2. And Tabitha Whitehouse for soprano 1. And our director of choirs could not be here tonight, Mr. Tim DeBoer, but in his honor, we do want to give him an applause as well for working with our young scholars.
Okay, guys, I'm a band parent. So, pretty excited for this.
I also
This is, you're, where are you? Here. Okay, I'll get you. Okay.
All right, congratulations to all our students on their achievements. At this time, Dr. Guzman has informed me there is district recognition and awards.
Yes, thank you. So to all of those in our audience, Friday was our School Board Appreciation Day. And so in honor of School Board Appreciation, we have our student ambassadors here tonight to share some of their experiences with our Board of Education. And then we also have tokens of our appreciation. So I'll invite our ambassadors to come forward.
Good evening, JTHS Board of Education. My name is Isina Ham, and I am a senior at Joliet West High School.
Hi, my name is Diana Mascote, and I am a senior at Joliet Central.
Good evening, board members. My name is Henry Maston. I'm a junior at Joliet West.
Good evening, my name is Berta Torres, and I'm a senior at Joliet Central.
Hi, my name is Diego Garcia, and I'm a senior at Joliet Central.
Hello, my name is Charles Walker, and I'm a senior at Joliet Central.
To recognize the efforts of school board members throughout the state, the Illinois Association of School Boards has named November 15th as School Board Member Day in Illinois, which we are here to celebrate tonight. This is an opportunity to build community awareness and understanding about the essential role locally elected officials serve in representative democracy, and a time to show our appreciation for their leadership in our schools and in our community.
School members are volunteers serving as advocates striving for quality education opportunities for every student. The members of our board take on their responsibility not only for a paycheck, or not for a paycheck, sorry. Not for a paycheck, but for their commitment for our community and its children.
Our board members act as frontline advocates, providing a local voice for the community, a vision for the district, and a pathway to success for our students. Our Board of Education acts to safeguard two of our community's most precious resources, our children and tax dollars, while striving to create the best education environment possible with the resources available. For this, we thank you.
As a part of our thanks, we would like to tell you about our experiences at Central and West because we are grateful for our schools. And we know that your leadership makes our educational experience possible.
It is my privilege to begin by sharing my high school experience with the board first. My name is Diego Garcia, and I'd like to take this opportunity to share a bit about myself today. I'm a wrestler, an AP student, and a member of the JTHS CEO program. These activities I am in have profoundly changed who I am as a person. As a wrestler, I've learned the value of discipline and hard work, which is not only required to be a wrestler, but to grow as a wrestler. Being in AP classes has challenged me to think critically, manage my time effectively, and develop a strong work ethic that has shaped my personal growth. And lastly, being a part of the JTHS CEO program has helped me develop into a more focused and mindful individual by placing me in positions I otherwise wouldn't have gotten in. And on the business side of things, I will not lie to you, I'm still exploring what path I want to take in the future. However, I can confidently say that this program is equipping me with the skills and mindset needed to succeed in the business world into a person that can be successful. Thank you.
Hello again, my name is Charles. Reflecting on my time here, I can honestly say that Joliet Central has given me an incredible high school experience, both academically and personally. I've had the opportunity to be involved in activities such as wrestling team, where I've been downstate twice as a steelman, and the JTHS CEO program, where students from both Joliet and West participate to learn from local entrepreneurs, listening to their stories, challenges, and strategies that opened my eyes in the world of entrepreneurship. It's taught me invaluable lessons in leadership, networking, and problem solving. Between the CEO program and the challenges of wrestling, I feel prepared and motivated to tackle whatever comes next. Joliet Central is a place I'm proud of, with dedicated staff and dedicated community members. It's truly a place that I care about and feel that I have success in my next chapter in life. Thank you.
Hello again, my name's Isina. In my time at Joliet West, I've had the privilege of participating in symphonic orchestra, where I served as a section leader before I was injured, marching band, pep band, varsity badminton, where I earned the recognition of an all-conference athlete last school year, varsity scholastic bowl, president of the debate club, president of Tigers Against Destructive Decisions, and a member of National Honor Society, Rho Kappa, and Mu Alpha Theta. Additionally, these activities have taught me to see different perspectives in ways I never would have thought about before. They have also taught me life lessons that I will cherish and carry forever in my heart. They have taught me lessons about self-respect, discipline, resilience, teamwork, and sportsmanship. I would like to thank the school board for ensuring we could come together as a community to represent our schools and our families. Thank you for ensuring a way for students to share our values, voices, and become well-rounded members of society, first here in Joliet and eventually in the world. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for your commitment to bettering student life, encouraging involvement in our society, and creating a stronger community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana, and my first day of high school, I cut my hair right up to my shoulders. While not intentional, I have let my hair grow with me while at my time at Joliet Central. When I see pictures of myself with short hair, I see a girl with so much ahead of her. And through the privilege of being part of both the Forge and President's Club, I have been able to grow leadership skills that I will take with me after high school. A teacher my freshman year would always, without fail, dismiss class with 2 words: be kind. To me, those words embody so much of Central's staff, teachers, coaches, security, and maintenance alike. A truly supportive environment that fosters growth, confidence, and care to each of its students. It is said that hair holds memories, and I have actively chosen to maintain my hair so long as to keep my memories from Central close with me. Because I know that all these experiences will help me and have shaped me into the person I am. Thank you.
Good evening, board members and guests. Once again, my name is Henry Maston, and I'm a junior at Joliet West. Although I enjoy school, I believe it offers more than just a learning experience. Up until middle school, I was homeschooled, which meant that I saw the same 4 students, otherwise known as my siblings, every day. This meant that my first encounter with a larger student body was junior high. However, I was surprised on my first day of high school when I found thousands of different cultures to learn about. I enjoyed meeting and connecting with these different people in order to learn the differences and similarities between our cultures, along with how these differences and similarities affected our interactions with one another. Additionally, it was an even greater surprise when I began to participate in clubs like Key Club, Garden Club, Future Business Leaders of America, and sports like soccer. These gave me opportunities to see how there are characteristics specific to these activities that brought us together. The bringing together of people is not an easy feat and could not have been achieved without the hard work of the JTHS Board of Education. The Board of Education has done an excellent job of opening opportunities to students to connect and learn from one another. Additionally, they have highlighted the strengths of their student body and continued restoration and expansion of our education system in order to appeal to a larger majority of the student body. Thank you and have a good night.
Hi, my name is Bertha, and I would like to talk about my experiences at Central. What really made my high school experience so special was the community and my involvement in athletics clubs and other activities such as marching band, pep band, cross country, badminton, fearless females, and human relations club. It has taught me time management skills and self-respect. The coaches and teachers motivate all students to be better than they already are. They strive for students to feel safe and encouraged. As students, we sometimes don't see the encouragement or support. Everybody here has made it possible for not only me, but other students to continue their post-secondary education, and I am grateful for the opportunities Central has offered. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation tonight. On behalf of the Joliet Township High School students, thank you, Joliet Township High School Board of Education members, for your service. We invite you to join us for a group photo and to receive a gift of appreciation. Audience, as they make their way down, please join us in a round of applause for our Joliet Township High School Board of Education.
Find your board member. Is that really? It's cool a lot, right? Without this, you're in the group picture too. I love here. You come in front of me because you're gonna pop back there.
As a former football coach, I was like, that's a linebacker in the defensive end, no matter receiver.
All right. Ready? Well done. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And word is out. You did a great job. Yay, Charles. Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to take a brief recess. Unfortunately, most of our students look like they left, but we'll come out and congratulate those who are left.
People are running.
Good to see you all. How you doing?
All right, we're going to call the meeting back to order at this time. Unfortunately, a lot of our students left before we could congratulate them, but again, on behalf of the board, congratulations to all of the students. A big thank you to the Ambassador Program. Absolutely one of my favorite student programs. Ms. Schlishman runs that. She does a fantastic job. I actually was introduced to that when I was first running for school board, happened to be at a community event. They were there, and I was just blown away by our kids, and I continue to be every time that they come and present to us, the students. That's the real reason why we do what we do. No offense, Mr. Lancaster. I'm sure there's really exciting stuff with the audit, but I know that we're here for the kids, and the stuff that they do consistently, just being able to talk to a few of them and the maturity that they have, well beyond what I had at 17, 18 years old. So very proud to be somebody who's helping to make decisions for those children. All right, at this time, we'll turn it over to Dr. Guzman for superintendent reports.
Thank you. I think I have it on. All right. So no correspondence or legislative reports, but we have our first presentation, the 2023-2024 annual financial presentation. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hampton to introduce our guest and share some information.
Yes, we have Tom Lancaster. He's the district auditor here to present the FY 2023-2024 annual financial report.
Thank you. Don't worry, I'm not covering all of this. You gotta press it. Good to go? Okay, all right. So you all should have received, first, thank you. You all should have received 4 documents from us for the audit. So there's the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or abbreviated ACFR, Annual Financial Report, or AFR, Single Audit Report, and then the Governance Letter. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to that as the SAS 114 letter. And then rather going through each report and letter page by page, I'll provide summarized data. So if I'm moving too quickly, feel free to stop me if you have questions or anything. Broadly speaking, the district's audit includes 2 components, the financial audit and the compliance audit. So financial audit is meant to test financial records and prepare accurate financial reports, as far as the district's financial position, and then other key metrics. And then there's the compliance audit, which is meant to determine whether the district is in compliance with federal grant requirements. And then for both of those, we have the deliverables we issue. The ACFR and AFR are part of the financial audit. Those contain financial statements that report district's assets, liabilities, net position, and then the net position is the amount that the assets exceed the liabilities. So then obviously the larger number there, the better. It would suggest a better financial position. The change in net assets, so did net assets increase or decrease from one year to the next? And then the fund balances of the district's 8 funds, and some other financial metrics that are used to assess the district's financial position. The ACFR includes our independent auditor's report, which this year, as in previous years, we issued an unmodified, which is referred to as clean opinion. That's the best possible result of an audit. This is the best report we can give, and it communicates that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The total assets and deferred outflows, and again, this is as of, so your fiscal year end, June 30th, 2024. So when I reference any assets or liabilities, it's a snapshot in time as of that date. So total assets and deferred outflows of approximately $454 million. Total liabilities and deferred inflows of approximately $215 million, for a total net position of approximately $239 million. So assets exceeded liabilities by over $230 million, which suggests strong financial position. District's net position for the year increased approximately $51 million from the previous year. Each of the district's 8 funds ended the fiscal year with strong fund balances. And the district is estimated to achieve a financial profile score of 4.0, resulting in an estimated designation of recognition. And 4 is the highest possible score you can receive. The district received the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. And are there any questions and comments on the financial audit before moving on to the compliance audit? And compliance audit, the summary is briefer. So that's what will also be referred to as a single audit. So a single audit, just to give a broad overview, a single audit is required when expenditures of federal awards exceed $750,000. So for a district of your size that has over $12 million in federal expenditures for the year, you're well over that threshold for requiring a single audit. And it just means we have to do additional testing. We do a risk assessment to determine which grants to test, and then test for compliance with those for the year. So that includes the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which we have to file. That goes to the federal government. It provides a record of all of the expenditures of federal awards for the year. And then that also has our summary of findings, which had no findings for fiscal year '24. So the best possible result of the single audit is no findings for the two programs we tested. And then the governance letter, which sort of covers both components of the audit. That's a required communication for all audits and provides an overview of our responsibilities as auditors and additional information about the audit process. There's nothing unique to the district that's reported in the communication with governance letter. So to summarize, there are no audit findings, and the audit results suggest that the district is in excellent financial position and manages district funds responsibly. Thank you for providing the opportunity to discuss the audit results, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions. I just want to congratulate Dr. Hampton. It's a heavy lift to go from 3.9, which burned me a little bit in the last few years, to 4.0. That's commendable, and appreciate all that you and your team do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree with Mr. Coffey, and thank you for the work that your firm does for our district as well. It's very appreciated. Is there any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thanks, and as always, we appreciate the opportunity to come out, so thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is from Dr. Hampton, the 2024 tentative tax levy.
Good evening to everyone. Each year, the district is required to adopt a tax levy. Tonight, I'm here to present the tentative tax levy to the Board of Education. The district is required to have an estimated tax levy on public display for no less than 7 days or more than 20 days prior to the adoption. So I'll walk you through the process in relation to our levy. So what you have up here is the summary of the levy. I know you received quite a few supporting documents with this information, but last year the district's total non-bond and interest fund tax extension was $95,242,342. So the way it works at that point is it's last year's extension times CPI. So that's the Consumer Price Index. Probably over the past few years, we've heard a lot about the Consumer Price Index, especially when it relates to the cost of goods and services. So essentially, it's a basket of goods that's comparable from one year to the next in the terms of the change of price, which then determines what they call the CPI. So the CPI for this tax levy is 3.4%. So essentially, last year's extension, the $95 million I just spoke of, times 3.4% plus new property is what would be levied for 2024's tax levy. We don't know what the new property would be until spring, so we have to levy a larger amount to capture all of those dollars. I would say that over the past 2 years, our new property has been over $200 million. Prior to that, it would be 34, 50, 60 million. But I think, as you all know, and we've talked about in terms of the Joliet area, there's a lot of economic growth occurring. So we're estimating the new property for this tax levy to be roughly about $112 million. That essentially helps us to try to capture extra dollars when the levy is made. So what happens with that at that point is we are proposing the adoption of a tax levy of $100,003,042. Now that's going to fluctuate again based on where that new property number comes in. If we don't levy a larger amount, then we lose that forever, right? So we always levy high to capture whatever the new property dollars are, and then it's levied from there. And since this amount is 4.9% higher than last year, then we don't have to do what they call the truth in taxation form, which we've had to do over the past 2 years because CPI was over 5%, right? So it's either CPI or 5%, the lesser of the two. So this year is 3.4%. Right now it's trending for 2025 at 2.9%. So within the next month, we'll know where that number is for the next levy. I also included on here the property tax relief grant that's through the evidence-based funding. We're entitled to about $8.2 million where we could rebate back to the taxpayers. However, only $50 million is allocated for this initiative. We're ranked 397 out of 850 districts. Normally those dollars are exhausted well before they get to 350. But we still apply each year. Never know what will happen, and we'll continue to do that as long as that initiative is there. The other piece here is we continue to see our equalized assessed value, so that's all of the property within our district. It's continued to increase over the past 9 years. The average has been about 5.83%, which is good, and it's a good sign in terms of, again, the economic viability that's occurring within our district. If the board approves the tentative levy, the timeline for adoption is estimated to today, presenting to the Board of Education, placed on public display on November 20th. The Board of Education would approve and adopt the levy December 17th at the next board meeting, and the last day to file is December 31st. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our last presentation is the 2024 school report card presentation, and myself, along with our principals and assistant superintendent, Diane McDonald, we will be presenting the information. So I first want to start with just giving some context, historical perspective. And of course, there's a lot of information in here, so you don't need to wait till the end. If you have questions while we're presenting, please let us know what those questions are. But I like to give this historical perspective because prior to this new revision of the school report card, high schools were really just solely measured on what ACT told us. And so I do appreciate the work that's been done with the new report card metrics. Do I agree with everything? No, but that's okay. But it's in a better direction. And so we did have some disruptions with COVID, but where we're at now, it's a multiple measure report card. And with that, each district in Illinois receives an annual designation. And the designation is to determine school improvement funds. So of course, there's rankings involved, there's no way around that, but it's truly meant to be a supportive structure so that schools that have a higher need of support are getting some additional funds for that support for the students. So then when we look at what those metrics are, this is a nice breakdown of it, and you've seen this before, but in case we forget what all the metrics are, but we have 75% of the report card is for academic indicators, and 25% is for what is called school quality and student success indicators. When you look at that pie chart, the biggest and 50% of the pie, there is graduation rate for high schools. High schools and K-8 schools are measured differently. So graduation for high school is 50%. You can also see proficiency for English language arts and math proficiency and science proficiency, where it used to be 100% ACT. Now it's 7.5% for math and ELA respectively, and then 5% for science. I do think it's important to note that we've been using the SAT or PSAT for the last, I want to say 6 years. Now we're going to be back to ACT. So we keep relearning the test. And we could argue about whether the SAT or ACT is the right measure, but it's what we have and what Illinois uses. So I do think that this is a better score, so it's not 100%, but there are some limitations and some issues that I do have with using the SAT or ACT. One of my concerns, especially for our student population, really any student, it's only available in English. So that's important to note. It's only available in English. And the only students in our EL population that are, I'm going to say waived from the test, if that's the right language, are students that are new to the country in their first year. So those are just some things to know. Context is important. Context is important. It's also important to note that the science test was the Illinois science test, or ISA. We went, and my background is science, so when we went from ACT to SAT, the state cited that we needed to go to SAT because the ACT science test didn't provide the information or assess what it needed to assess. Apparently now it does. And so we're gonna go back to ACT, and the ACT science portion is going to give us the science information that it does. So I was frustrated 6 years ago. You might be picking up on a little frustration right now, but that's okay. So, and then also our English language program progress to proficiency, which Ms. McDonald is going to explain in more detail to give context for that. As far as the 25% school quality and student success indicators, chronic absenteeism is 10%. That's probably one of our greatest factors that we need to work on with our community. We need parents to help us get students to school. And so we'll share some of that data. The climate survey, which for us is the 5 essentials, and then 9th graders on track to graduate. And then in 2025, college and career readiness and fine arts will also be part of that 25%. They're actually available now on the school report card, but they're not part of the measurement for this report card. Any questions about the divisions?
So the chronic absenteeism, that is not just unexcused absences. That's for kids that are gone for parts of the day, field trips, maybe excused absence, parents say that
Not
they...
field trips.
Okay.
And I want everybody to correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll test the superintendent. But it does include like exclusionary discipline, excused, unexcused. It does include medical. The only thing that's covered is hospital instruction that is approved.
So hospital instruction doesn't count against you for
Correct.
absenteeism, but
Correct. But
doctor's appointment,
homebound, so like. when
not
a stu-
receiving services, homebound.
When students are receiving homebound services while they're on suspension, that does count against you.
Okay.
It also tallies part days.
Right.
So it's a full day, so if a student misses 2 periods 4 times, that's the equivalent of
Every day, yep.
Is
Okay.
that including homebound instruction for medical issues also?
If it's approved and it's hospitalization, homebound, then it doesn't count against you.
Only hospitalization, though? Okay.
All right. And we've looked through that. We've made sure our coding is correct. We've worked really hard on that, so we do believe our data is accurate. This is where we're at, and then we're working on it. But we do. This is not just a JTHS problem. It's a nationwide problem. But I would also consider this a community problem because we need parents and guardians to help us get kids to come to school every day. So
I just want to oh, go ahead. You had said you're working on the absentee. It kind of looks very similar to last year. What have you done from last year to this year to try to make it better?
there's a slide for that. Do you mind when we get to that slide that we can go
Sure.
through that? Because there's a slide on that and the principals will talk through that. Absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify. We gave our students 5 mental health days in the state of Illinois, but unless they're hospitalized, it still counts against us. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, thank you.
That's true too. Yep.
Excused absence, that's what I'm saying.
And the data has gotten worse since COVID, for sure. But yes, so any questions on the metrics? All right, so as far as our annual summative designation, Joliet West, and there's now 5 categories. There was 4 if you compare this to the report card last year, because schools that were in comprehensive and they did not move out of comprehensive, they then moved into intensive support. That we're not included in that at this time. We were actually targeted at Joliet Central for English language learners. We are now no longer targeted for English language learners, but we are targeted for the 24 cohort for students with disabilities. So we're actually part of a new cohort and we're targeted. Joliet West has the rating of commendable, and the definitions are up there.
So will that impact, I know Joliet Central received significant funding for EL programs and supports. Does that go away, that they're?
So and I want to qualify, we receive funding. I wouldn't necessarily say it's significant.
Okay.
The first year you're on targeted, it's called a planning year, and it's $15,000.
Okay.
The next year it does go up, but I want to say it's like 30 or 60,000. Everything that we did with the aid of the 1003 grant, we have now moved over to EBF funding.
Okay.
So we're funded through like other dollars. So some examples, we have a social worker who is bilingual. We have a instructional coach at Joliet Central that is bilingual. We helped subsidize those costs with the 1003 grant, but it didn't pay for everything. Does that help with the question?
So, yeah, so you have other means you're not cutting programs or services based on losing that funding?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There's nothing that we're cutting from EL that we have in place right now.
Okay.
In fact, we're having a discussion tomorrow. What do we need going forward? Because it's still, even though we're not targeted for that population, it's still a population that has our focus.
Were there any increased, like Title III funds for EL?
That went down too.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Really,
Yeah.
so honestly, this is a great conversation to have, because I think one of the most important things for our funding right now is EBF funding. So getting that EBF funding has allowed us to do the things that we've been able to do, but we're being very mindful when we come to you with recommendations to ensure that those are sustainable. Because you never know when that funding could be cut. It's a yearly discussion. It's a yearly discussion. So we want to make sure they're sustainable. So that's where the staffing we put towards EBF, but maybe some other software or platforms that we used, we put into Title 1 or 3. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's really important for context too, because while, first of all, I want to state, and I know I've said this before, there is nowhere I'd rather send my kids to school. I have graduates from Joliet Central and Joliet West. I think our programs are second to none. We teach every student and we meet students where they're at, and our staff at both schools do an exceptional job. And I think hyper-focusing on report card data of any school sells schools short or enhances what maybe opportunities don't exist there. When you talk to our students and you heard from them tonight, we have so many opportunities for our kids, and I think we're doing great work with our kids. So I want to put that out there. But I think it's important to understand the context of our students and our staff, and we have so many needs of our students that we must consider when we're educating the whole child. So the first thing I just want to make sure we're aware of is English language learner percentages. The state has seen an increase. Every school has seen an increase. However, our schools, and especially Joliet Central, there's not another school with the percentage of English language learners that Joliet Central has. And if you're curious of that, I pulled all the data today. Joliet Central is double than any other school in the region at about 30%. So, and I put the state averages on there as well. And then also low income. Many times it's an opportunity gap. Who has access to kindergarten? Who has access to preschool is really, really important. And and kindergarten's still not mandatory, so some students don't start in kindergarten. And so our low-income students, that's part of our story, so we can't forget that. And we're one of the highest percentages, and Joliet Central is the highest in the region by 20%, I pulled that as well. So then we go to daily attendance, and we will get to what we're working on with attendance, but this is just the data. So this is our average daily attendance that is up there, but also our chronic absenteeism. And as Mr. Fitzpatrick pointed out, Joliet Central is pretty much exactly where it was last year, and Joliet West has increased a little bit. And so this is a major obstacle because we have great programs, but if kids aren't in school on a regular basis, they can't access those programs. Mobility rate is also part of our story. Both Joliet Central and Joliet West do have a higher mobility rate than the state average. So you're going to see this with graduation rate when they share some of their data. We have students for 4 years as graduation rate counts. We do have some students for longer, which is absolutely fine. We have a certain percentage of students that have 3 different high school enrollments by the time they graduate from Joliet West or Joliet Central, or by the time it's time to graduate. So that disruption is very disruptive to the educational process. So and that's just the context, and those are not excuses, because we own the work that we have to do, and we're very passionate about the work that we have to do, and we're always thinking about how can we better support our students. So as you know, the board-approved strategic plan, we have, and I just listed some of the action plans up there, but we have action plans and strategies and objectives that speak to graduation rate, proficiency, chronic absenteeism, and 9th grade on track. And throughout this year, and then definitely in May, you're going to get progress reports on the work that we've been doing. And you're going to hear about some of that information tonight, and you heard about it last year as well. You're aware of our MTSS structure and things like those things that we keep enhancing.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about the attendance issue? So have we done like a study to look at excused absences versus truancy versus discipline removals? Like, where are those, where's the, like if you could say, the biggest issue is we have too many kids excused absence, okay? Let's target an intervention for people that think it's okay to take 10 days off of school for whatever reason. Or what is happening with the students that are being excluded from school due to discipline? Is there other options or supports that we can put in place to not have the only option to be to stay at home? Have we looked at disaggregating that data?
We have Panorama now, correct? We have, do you want to speak to that really quick, or Diane, whomever want to speak to how we're looking at that?
I would say we've looked at a number of things. Going back to when we talk about the things that you all have graciously approved for us, one of the missions of our Catalyst program, we speak to exclusionary discipline was to get students back into the building because then they're in the building receiving services. They're,
Right.
number one, addressing the areas, coping strategies that they need to learn to respond in a different way, but they're also receiving services and in school. We've addressed the beginning of this school year, we looked at the percentage of students who had part day absences is what we call it. So those students who are missing 2 periods or 3 periods from either truancy issues or arriving halfway through the school day. And we're addressing that different. And we're talking about that in a slide to come, addressing that differently this year by delineating responsibilities within the building between our administrators, our deans, our MTSS team, so on and so forth.
I just think it would be helpful for me, and I'm assuming the other board members, to just kind of see, like, what is there a main problem? Is it even across the board? Is it, you know, like the coding kind of
We can
assessment?
do a follow-up presentation on that, but what I will say, the monthly discipline reports that I put in the weekly, I think I just put it in a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we've been tracking exclusionary discipline in multiple ways, and one of the ways is like days out of school. So the number of assigned discrete out-of-school discipline that counts as exclusionary, but then how many days does that equate to? So over the last 3 years, we've been able to decrease the overall days, even though sometimes the assignment of expulsion or of exclusionary discipline incidents has increased because of what Takara said. So that's one way we're measuring it. When we started pulling, and we have done this, and that's why we can put together a presentation, I think, for in January, or that can show a little bit more, especially first semester, to sort of dissect it. But we have kids that are missing way more than the 10% that can, you know, the
Yeah.
chronic truant. And with those students, it's a little bit of everything. And then there's some students that are right at the cusp. So I think it's everywhere, and it's different for each student.
Right.
And so, but we can put together a presentation.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's hard to see it when it's like a month at a time or 2 months at a
Sure.
time, you know, to kind of see.
I have a plan, so I know Blackboard also uses the frontline or 5 lab frontline with the analytics. So I have a dashboard for period attendances, day attendances, and then it breaks it down by code. So I can actually, like, if the board wants that as part of their monthly report, like with the discipline, we can include that as an information, and then we can also follow up with like a semester report too. But I can easily pull that.
Yeah, those are, I mean, that kind of report that you can just plug in and pull, that would, I don't want to create like a whole.
We have all those set up.
Okay.
We set those up, but then I do think, and that was Mr. Fitzpatrick's question too. Takara and Chad will talk about sort of what we've done to look at different types of attendance issues a little differently with different offices. So I won't steal their thunder, but we'll talk about that too, if that helps. And so, oh, sorry, here. So graduation rate. This is just for your reference, and again, this is 50%, so we're starting with this. But this just shows you where our graduation rate has been for the last 6 years. I think it's important to note, though, we're going to show you some other data. This class, and we did go down in graduation rate, but this class also had a unique experience because of COVID in high school. And so I want to show the freshman on track rate for that group and talk about that a little bit. But this is just for your historical information, really right before COVID and then after COVID. So then, again, enrollment, so that you can just know what the numbers are in each student group on the report card. If there's a blank up there, it's because there wasn't enough students. It's not published on the school report card, so, or NA. Sometimes it's just blank on the school report card, and sometimes it's an A. I'm not sure why, but whatever the school report card had is what we entered into the chart. And so this is what I wanted to share with the board. So in school year 21, fiscal year 21, so 2021, this was the group of students that missed out on their last 3 months of 8th grade, and then their first full year of high school, when we gave students the opportunity to come back in February, only 25% came back in person. And there was less of a percentage, slightly less at Central than there was at West, but it was very low. So many of our students were remote for 20 months. That equated to those 9th grade on track. That is way different than any other year. So when we've been then using the CARES money, the ESSER money to do tutoring and to do the different programs, the credit recovery programs, I think it was essential, I know it was essential for these groups of students to get the percentage of where we're at with graduation rate. But this was a unique experience for that group of students. That's not to be like the kids that are in school right now with us. I think it was our Christine and I were meeting with our student group, and the freshmen put some things in perspective, because they said, I was in 3rd grade when I was home from school. We're like, oh, wow. And so, I mean, we're still gonna see the effects of COVID for several years, but our 12th graders last year were disrupted by COVID.
So what this is saying is, based on that data, our graduation rate could have been 48% and 50s. Oh, clearly impacted, but it could have been 48% and 57% if we wouldn't have put in all the things that we did to try and catch them back up based on what happened.
We had to put in those extra supports, which we're going to keep for other students, but absolutely, they were deeply impacted by COVID. Absolutely. So then when we look at the 4-year graduation rate, I just highlighted, so students with disabilities is the targeted group at Central. That does include students with IEPs and students with 504s, but the entire group is labeled students with disabilities. But that's a focus for the entire district, not just Joliet Central. And if I could tie it back to the strategic plan, strategy 2.2 is focused on that. You know that we've been working with Dr. Brown as a consultant, our special education team, as well as our EL team that's also part of 2.2, have recommendations that they're bringing forward that actually we're meeting to discuss tomorrow. So you'll most likely be seeing recommendations from those action plans, but that's been a focus, and obviously it'll continue to be a focus. So I'm going to turn it over for a little bit.
Excuse me. So for Joliet Central, as you saw, the graduation rate for the class of 2024 was 75.2%. It was slightly down from the year before. We have, from being honest, kind of hit a plateau for the last several years. And so our focus is always to look at what are our unique challenges, what has changed over the time, what programs have we added or we need to continue to add to try to reach all of our students. So I'm not going to read all of this to you. You're well aware of, members of the Board of Education, because you approve the resources and everything it takes to make these things happen. But as you're well aware, we continue to add programming. We continue to, through our strategic planning process, identify gaps and identify needs and try to continue to add and be innovative. And we're hoping to continue to see some growth here and beyond what we've reached, if I'm being honest. Just like Dr. Guzman has said, we don't, something that I say it every year, and I say it to staff, and I have my entire time in leadership, we don't make excuses for where we are. We own the data that we have, and we work to get better. And you know, we need to reach every student, and that's our responsibility. So 75.2% is not good enough, you know, for me, because, and we'll get to the slide in a bit of the non-graduates, but to me, these aren't numbers, these are kids.
I do want to agree with you, but I do want to highlight the fact that we were on pace to be at 48%. So the fact that you guys put in the work to close that gap, I mean, yes, that's not the number we wanted to be at. But from the starting point that you were dealt, the hand you were dealt, just based on the situation, like that's, thank you to you and your staff and the hard work that you guys put in.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would also want to add is, because I mentioned like that we've kind of hit a plateau here with graduation rate, in spite of like the number of recovery and programs that we've put in. And it's my opinion that we have to look at some systemic changes in how we do things. And one of the things that most excites me about our current strategic plan is there's several things in that plan that are systemic changes to how we operate. And I do believe that is hopefully going to move the needle in that, because I think those are some of the things that we need to look at, like the structure of the school day and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that work being completed.
For Joliet West, if you notice, the slide is very similar. We had a graduation rate of 83.3, and this was a dip from our from last year, where we were at about 86% for our graduation rate. The lists are very similar because we implemented things district-wide outside of the EL support that Central received for a bilingual instructional coach as well as a bilingual social worker. What is unique for West during the time period that this cohort was with us is that we established our own EL program so that students no longer had to transfer to Central to receive the services that they needed, but they were able to receive those services at home, and that was a huge win for our students who are within our boundaries to stay with their cohort, with their friends, and attend the school that is within their boundaries. I do share the same sentiments as Shad. This is a piece that we continue to work at, and I know he and I during the summer literally go through each one of our non-grads to see what their story is, and we'll speak to that in the next slide.
Thank you. So this is, as Takara mentioned, something we started doing probably 9 or 10 years ago, and the SIS program that ISB has does a really nice job of giving us reports so that we can identify exactly who all of those non-graduates are. And we do look up each of those non-graduates, first to just confirm that their exit code was correct and that they weren't actually like summer grads or things like that, but also to try to glean some information about like where perhaps this student fell through the cracks or where we lost this student. And now we were able to run some reports too for that. But it's some valuable data, and I won't go through all of it for you. We've talked about this each year, but we are required to not graduate students who, based on their IEP, continue at Transition Center or continue at their outside placement, and those students do count against us for graduation rate. Again, that is not something unique to us. That's the same for all schools. So that impacts, each school, but I don't know if all schools have those numbers, but it's just something to again, be aware of. But then we start to look at, and these are just like criteria or benchmarks that, that I created several years ago to think like, identify, okay, how many students were almost there? Like how many kids are we getting close, but we just can't get them across the finish line? And how many kids like they just never, they were not even close, and so on and so forth. As well as, and Dr. Guzman mentioned this, our mobility rate is a challenge, because if a student is going from high school to high school, that creates difficulties for them, and we have students who do that mid-year and things like that. And again, we work with every single one of those students and do the best we can on their behalf. And there's no blame, shame, or guilt about that, but it's just a factor that we have to keep in mind. So, and one thing we did differently this year was try to look at, of those students in those categories in credits, how many of them were also met that other criteria. So that's what that means there. And then the last thing I'll say on this is the number for over 20 credits, you have to keep in mind, and I don't have the exact number, but those 19 who continued at transition, or excuse me, 29, and continued at their outside placement are counted in that 37. Many of them are. I can't say that all 29 are. So next year, that's a change that I'll make to make that a little more accurate. So we didn't truly have 37 students who were that close, because many of those students are in those first two categories.
Okay, that makes sense.
Do you look at data concerning like McKinney-Vento and, foster care and,
We have not run that, but we could. So I appreciate that suggestion. We haven't, like, when we're looking through it, I see those things in like the logs and in the tabs. But that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
And I think we can and should kind of expand some of these criteria that we're looking at for these students. And that reminded me of something else I wanted to say. I'm sorry, Ms. Parker, but when we started doing this several years ago, one of the things that I always thought about is it's good information, but it's too late for these students. Like we're looking at students who are non-graduates and where they fall. And I really am proud of our MTSS process and MTSS structure, and how we're looking at data for freshmen, sophomore, juniors, et cetera, so that we can catch them so they don't land in this category. This is kind of after the fact, and now the goal is to identify these students when they're freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and have them not be on this list in a few years.
I mean, it is important to note, we didn't have our MTSS structure in place for these graduates when they were freshmen. So we implemented that, or began implementation. And so, again, we're in a different place now, and as you know, our evaluation goals, they're meeting with their staff once a month. We're looking at data. Our MTSS teams are looking at data, and so there's just a lot of work being put into this. And we try and look at everything a little bit more each year. And this slide keeps getting longer, and we had to keep making the font smaller to fit in more information, to just try and learn about, have this inform what we need to do differently in the future.
And I'm sure Shad shares this sentiment, but when, as he began to respond to the question, I thought about the context of the information we pull for each one of our students when we're looking at their logs and the things that have been inputted from our counselors and our social workers and our deans of interventions that they've worked with students and families on throughout their time here. As we're combing through each individual kid, it's awesome for me, and I know you feel the same way, to read through those as a testament to the work that our staff does. And I have to, before I even address the numbers, give them an applause and a thank you, of course, of gratitude of the work, the hard work that they do for each one of these students, because there was not one of my 144, when I looked up their information, that I saw blank information. There was always something, an effort being made on their behalf, and that consistency, while it didn't get them to the finish line, I do believe that it pays in some form of a dividend. But when you look at our 144 non-grads, Shad spoke to, one of the things that is highlighted here for me is going right back to that mobility rate, because this jumped for West from last year. When you look at those last few categories, we jumped up to 52.1% of our non-grads being students who transferred into our school who did not originally start with us. 59, and I know the numbers are exactly the same, but they are actually two different lists of students. Check that a couple times to make sure that that was accurate. 59 of the 144 students had 3 or more enrollments in high school. And when you consider those who were spent less than 2 years with us, 34 of those students were one of the 3 or more high school enrollments. So that's a lot of movement, a lot of change, a lot of adapting that those students had to do, not to make an excuse, but to paint a real picture of the challenges that they had to face to get to the point where they were at.
Yeah, and it's really to point out like what actually happened, because it wasn't just the pandemic. If you look at the mobility rate data, during 21, it was extremely low. Well, that was because the moratorium that was put on evictions and foreclosures. So kids were able to stay where they should be. And then you see it jump and spike right back up. And so these kids were affected by the pandemic and then post-pandemic too. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's the picture that you're painting. And it's real stuff that happened.
And I just want to add too, I believe it's at both campuses, we have continued to grow like programming and groups for transfer students. So that's an example of looking at this data and saying, okay, like what more can we do to help students who are transferring and adjust and make connections and learn more about our school and be successful when they're here. So as I mentioned, even though this is, these students have already moved on, we can look at this and say, okay, what can we do differently for those students who are coming next based on this, so that hopefully these numbers go down.
That was going to be my question. So technically, the ones that are continuing at, we know where those students are. So how are we following, like, of those students, did all of them come back for a 5th year? Were they attended some type of program? Like where, because we can still collect them as graduates in year 5 and year 6. So do we, I know that it's an autopsy for 4 years, but is there, like, where are they?
I think it's something else to note is that, like for West, for example, these 144 students didn't all finish at Joliet West, as I'm sure you know. So a lot of these students who are considered non-grads like drop as sophomores or move not known to be continuing. One thing that I noticed in looking at the central data is, and I look at it all the time, especially today, like we had 0 students identified as moving out of the country. And I find it hard to believe that none of our non-grads left the country. And so like there's some things we need to do in terms of like working with families, to make sure that we're trying to get as much information as we can when they withdraw students, because we have to, not to get too deep in the weeds, but if we don't get a records request from another school for that student, verifying that they moved into another district, whether it's in the United States or otherwise, we have to count them as a non-grad. And I think it's safe to say that with our student population, we have students who are, going elsewhere and re-enrolling in another school, maybe with unofficial transcripts and things, and they're counting against us as non-grads. So that's some work I think we need to do too with our families to try to just help with the communication about like where they're headed.
With that though, do we have an idea of kids in that 5th year, 6th year that we can recapture? Are there some of those? I mean, I know it may not be a huge substantial number, but.
And when I think that was, sorry.
It's here.
Yeah, so
Okay.
so we are tracking it and everything, and to your question, we do know, and we can go look up, like, our registrars, our assistant principals, like, they know who's in their 5th or 6th
Okay, good.
year. And so we could actually, I'm trying to see who can take notes so I don't forget. When we do that debrief, like that dissection of attendance data, we could come back and give, a report on how many 5th year and 6th year students we currently have. We could include that in there.
Cool.
So, but we do have that access to that data.
Okay.
Sorry. All right, you guys ready for that?
So what are we doing? For graduation rate, we listed the current and some new things that we've added within the last few years to address students who have fallen either off track or things to assist them in remaining on track. Things that I would like to highlight that are new within the last few years is the additional support that we receive from our family engagement liaisons. We hired at both campuses an additional Spanish speaking to support the need for that population. In addition to that, we've increased our partnerships with Will County Mental Health. We've increased our partnerships with JJC. We've created the Golden Grads summer program, so on and so forth. These are things that we've brought forth to you throughout the past few years for approval that we know has and will have an impact on our graduation rate as far as setting and helping students to set goals and have a focus beyond just the diploma. We know that helps to keep them motivated when they're working towards a goal beyond just the diploma that they receive. Think about the approval of School Links and our post-secondary counselor, our college and career counselor, and the program that is really thriving right now at both campuses. If you ever get a chance to come in, stop by and see the work that's happening there. Anything else that you would like to highlight?
The AVID program, I know we're all extremely excited about that, and continued expansion of that. And I know we haven't gotten to the attendance data and the interventions yet, in the work we're trying to do to improve attendance, but I think we all realize that none of these things happen in a vacuum. You know, they are all connected, and so as you saw on the previous slide of the non-graduates at each campus, like over 70% of the non-graduates were also identified as chronic absenteeism. And these academic interventions and SEL interventions are extremely important to help students towards graduation rate, but I believe the same things that we do to get students to come to school are the same things going to get them to graduate. You know, having a welcoming environment, having them connected with an adult, having them feel like they belong in our buildings, having them have a post-secondary goal or understand why they're here and why this matters. Like, those are the things that are they're not easy. You can't just put in a program to make that happen, although we are trying with several of the things in the strategic plan. But if we can get more kids to have that understanding and make those connections and feel those things, I feel like that's going to boost all of this.
I think the only thing I would add, you can see we have our online tutoring on here. That was something that came out of COVID and with ESSER money, and we put that into Title I. We knew we were going to have to probably decrease it a little bit, but we're still continuing to look for any competitive grants that we can get and apply for. So a good example would be the Stronger Connections grant. We won that grant, so then we were able to, put tutoring into that. We also got the after-school grant that was not competitive. That's based on our needs and the needs of our students. And in your packet tonight, there's a job description. It's the same job description for online tutoring, but it's in-person tutoring. After school, while this is a good opportunity for some students, in-person is a good opportunity for other students. So we're going to now have both that we can implement. So that's something in addition that we're looking to implement through those additional funding.
Thanks.
So I know that these are a lot of academic initiatives. And so, when I look at the number of students continuing on in transition type programs, one question that I ask myself is, I know that they're all students with IEPs. And what I know that they're working on some proposals for special education, but there are several students that stay in transition because they just need a little bit more, or they just need some daily living skills. Is there any conversation or look at what are the services that those students need that maybe we can provide during their senior year in order to maybe alleviate the need to continue on for that just a little bit more?
He's like, pick me.
Go for it.
So at West, we started back up the IRO program, which is helping students get jobs in the community. And we really are working on a lot of those deep skills. A couple October, we went to the YMCA and just like volunteered for half a day, and then we went bowling. So that first half of the day was a lot of very structured work, but like, all right, Caesar, you're doing this, let's figure out a way to do it. And it was very focused on having some observation, but then also just getting them to do some of those things. And that student today applied in the
Yeah, I mean, the flexibility of an elective is what like that can be individualized, that isn't, like, there's no work experience SAT, right? But there is real life community integration kind of opportunities for kids.
So another example, and again, we're not recommending this for next year because we're prioritizing and working on things, but the IRO discussion and the expansion is so we're having this discussion of work-based learning for all students, students with IEPs and students without IEPs, and how we put that into the school day for all students. And so we have a group that is working on that from the regular ed and special education side, and they're coming with a proposal of how that could look for the 26-27 school year, and that's tied to,
Are they like considered like STEP programming? Like, are you putting it on their IEP as a STEP program, or?
No, but the thing that I was going to point out is we had the transition step-up day, and like my kids are obviously the target. There were only 2 other students that weren't in IRO that went on that transition day, but I only had 3 that were like, oh no, you actually really do need this help. There's at least 2 kids that I would have thought would have been transition kids, but we got them into a job, and like, we could do a really good job at Jewel. Like, he's got it.
Good. Good. Yeah, thank you. Put him in the credits.
I didn't know we had a guest speaker.
It's Andrew Smothers, West teacher extraordinaire. He does everything for us. We're going to talk a little bit about proficiency. So I'll move quickly through these slides because it's been a lengthy presentation already. So within the school report card, we are also given an overall summative rating based on 3 areas for proficiency. One is related to English language arts, math, and science. So Dr. Guzman gave an overview of the SAT students sit in the spring, and they take that. That is 99% of all our 11th grade students. We have some students that, based on their IEPs, are not recommended to take the SAT. They'll take the DLM. But most of our students that are in 11th grade take it, also 12th graders who have not sat. And the same with the Illinois Science Assessment. So this testing environment last spring, one day was the SAT. The second day they came back for the Illinois Science Assessment. You can see where we are in regards to the district rate compared, which is the light green compared to the state, which is the dark green. Another target you have to make with the state is you have to hit at least 95% participation rate. So that is also, if students do not show up for test day, then our administration works very hard within a window, according to the state, to find students when they do come to school to have them take the assessments. Because if we don't hit that 95% rate, we are penalized and we don't get the full points towards our overall summative. So that is another caveat that we have to work through. So here you can see within the proficiency scale, there's 4 ratings, level 1 compared to level 4. So to meet proficiency, our students have to hit levels 3 and 4. You also see our comparison. The district is in green, and then the state averages are in white. On the left is your ELA, and then on the right is math. Just to give everybody an overview of what our students sat for the SAT reading and math. So the SAT, and this includes our everyone, and the test is given in English. The reading part, English reading, is called ERW, English reading and writing, information and ideas. So it's about reading comprehension. craft and structure. So they're supposed to give feedback on sentence structure, expression of ideas, giving suggestions of how they can improve a passage, and then convention, so grammar. On math, it's calculator and no calculator, algebra, advanced math, problem solving, data analysis, and geometry and trig. And then I remember our students have 4 years of English, 3 years of math, and they sit for the test as an 11th grader, whether they may be in algebra, geometry, or advanced algebra. It depends on where they are with their math progression. And then for science, the juniors take it. Remember, our graduation rate for science is 2 years, so they would have biology and physics, and then they sit for the science test as juniors, and junior year science is an elective. Am I pressing the wrong buttons? There we go. All right, the next part is English language learner progress to proficiency. And first I want to say thank you to the board for approving this new administrative position last year. To have a sole position directed towards our multilingual students has just been a game changer this year. Mr. Palacios has really brought a change already, and we've seen it. And even the feedback from administration, we have learned so much from him with his time here since just July 1st. So just for context, as we look at this, what you're seeing is Illinois scores versus Joliet Central. The next slide is Illinois scores and Joliet West. It gives you the total number of students that took this. These are the access scores. So access, proficiency for access to exit out and to be considered, I've exited services, it's a 4.8. So that's when they hit that bridging to reaching. So it gives you the breakdown. So the lightest green is the lowest score compared to the darkest green. And I'll share Joliet West. So here's Joliet West. But here's some context that Mr. Palacios shared with me. Our total EL population for the district is 1,625 students. And we have to put those students into buckets because of their unique needs and their history. So we have 240 students in the district that are considered newcomers. These students fall within the 5-year growth formula under English language proficiency plan. So what happens is that if a student's a newcomer, we have them, if we have a new student this year, new to the country and new to the education system, their first year taking an access score will be their baseline score, and then they have 5 years to meet their growth target. So if I scored a 1.7 and I need to be at a 4.8 for proficiency, then they take that difference, divide it by 5, and that's my growth target over 5 years. So these students fall into that proficiency range. We also have 963 students that are considered recent arrivals.
How many?
963. These students entered our schools within the last 2 years as 9th graders or transferred from other schools. They do not fall under this 5-year window and these target growth requirements. However, these students are called long-term ELs. So what happens is that they may have been identified as an English language learner in early elementary. And what Mr. Palacio has shared with me and has taught me is that students see growth at the elementary level when they're taking their access score, and then they plateau, and then they tend to go down as they get older and into junior high. And that is because they're in classes only speaking Spanish and not progressing towards the English language to give them practice. And then we have 422 students that are considered long-term ELs. These students potentially refuse services, which began in elementary school. They also give us they represent a large growth targets and are far past their 5-year window for growth. And we are only responsible for their adjusted growth scales. So like every student, like we can't just say this score is for all of our students. Each student is a unique situation and a unique history, but working with Mr. Palacios and our team, we've really let's go ahead. We've really gone into working with our group. So one thing that we're doing for this year regarding access testing is that we are going to adjust how we give the access test, especially for our newcomers. So in the past, because we have so many, especially at Joliet Central, they would leverage the multipurpose rooms and test large groups of students. Based on the feedback from Mr. Palacios and the team, we're going to come up with district specific testing environments for our different groups of students. So our newcomers, we want them to test with their teachers in their classrooms, you know, in the environment that they're used to. And then the students that are in the further towards, closer to proficiency, those are the students that we could put in larger groups. But our most, how would you say, most fragile students in that lower level of the access score, we're gonna really try to just personalize and keep that testing environment, the same environment they've had all year with their teachers.
And I think what's really important and is, you know, these are students that are still really working on their English language skills, right? When you look at our data versus the state, we have a higher percentage of students that are on this side than the state does. And when we talk about proficiency in the SAT, those kids are sitting and taking the SAT. So it's that part, and every time I get to talk to legislators, I talk about, you know, a couple things. The fact that foreign language requirement is going into effect soon, which is problematic because kids will be required to take foreign language and what that can do to our CTE and fine arts programs. So we still need to talk about that. But also, kids required to take a test that they can't read, when you talk about harmful behavior for kids, I can't think of something that is more detrimental than forcing them to take a test that everybody, including them, know that they can't read. And if we don't hit that 95% rate, then we get no scores. So it doesn't make sense. And so I think we still need to talk about that with legislators, because even when you look at percentage of EL students, not all EL students are in the same categories. And so the EL students we have in our district can be very different than the high percentage of EL students they have in 230. Because we have many students that come to us and they don't have transcripts. So where do we place them? You know, and now we have some philosophies in place of where we place them. But I do think there's some things that are part of the system that don't make sense, and I think we all need to be aware of that. We need to keep talking it and pushing that, because I don't think that part is right, so.
And I dug deeper because and you can do that too by grade level. So at ninth grade, we have 13% of our students in that entering. So district-wide, I didn't break it down by campus. But it grows by grade level. So we have more students that when they come to us, the older they are, the greater the percentage, we have more students. So 17% of our 10th graders are in that first level. 20.1% in 11th grade are in that level, and then 25.2 in 12th graders.
And you're saying in that primary?
Yes, in the entering. So the next slide goes over everything that we're working on in regards to proficiency, but we are updating our literacy curriculum for our newcomers to make it not only focus on literacy, but connecting to that post-secondary planning, just to make that connection for our students. We've really expanded our BPAC and parental outreach with our families. The feedback, the turnout has been phenomenal, and we're really focusing on language. And one thing we've learned is that our students need to talk in classrooms. They need to talk in English, they need to talk in Spanish, they need to build their confidence in classrooms where they feel safe and comfortable with their teachers. Because if you can't, like, if you're not gonna, you have to be able to talk, we all know this, like, we have to talk through things first, and then we'd move into the writing, and then we move into the reading. So the really focus on oracy, you'll be hearing that a lot more the next couple of years as we restructure our literacy plan from the state guidance. But really what we're learning is our EL students, working with all EL students, we need to provide more opportunities for our students to speak in our classrooms.
And I just want to commend Mrs. McDonald and working with Mr. Palacio. They've been doing training with all of our evaluators to talk about what you should be seeing in SciUp classrooms and in students that have EL students in their bilingual classes. And so that's ongoing training we're going to continue. That has been very well received by our administrators too.
Thank you. I'll turn it back to the principals.
Thank you. So we have mentioned chronic absenteeism a few times already, and Mr. Fitzpatrick, thank you for your patience. I know you had a question about that, and you are correct that these numbers have not improved, and that is something that is not lost on us, and we've really tried to, even though we did have efforts last year and initiatives last year in this area. They clearly didn't have a significant enough impact. We did increase our communication to families and the frequency of that communication to families about the importance of attendance and regular attendance and the benefits of regular attendance. Some of the things, heading into this year, seeing that we had not put a dent in these numbers and the importance of doing that, we have gone further in a number of ways, and I'll highlight a few, and I'll let Ms. Parker also highlight some as well. I'll speak specifically to part day absences. As we referenced previously, this number does take into account part day absences, not just full day. And our deans at both campuses have been working extremely hard on top of the more severe disciplinary things that they address when those things occur. On addressing part day absences, students who specifically at the end of the day are perhaps leaving early, and not staying the entire day, but also looking at with the triangle teams and school counselors, students who are perhaps arriving late. And we, Mr. Randich at Central has been working with technology to run some data on that. And has been sharing that with our staff and with our team, and we are putting a significant dent in those part day absences. That's one of the reasons I grabbed my computer is, as of end of October, the number was approximately 20,000 fewer periods missed, meaning not full days, but just part days. So 3 here, 2 there, 4 there, and so that's a credit to our deans for the work that they're doing of monitoring that, of addressing it when students are not, when they think it's okay to leave. And it's especially a challenge for us at Central, being a school right downtown with a Walgreens 20 feet away and everything else. But they're really working on that. And then lastly, and I'll turn over to Ms. Parker, we also, I know at both campuses, are focusing on, as with everything we do, but especially with attendance, I think sometimes it's important to emphasize that it's every one of us, it's our responsibility to focus on attendance, and we all have a role to play. It's just a slightly different role. The research shows that classroom teachers probably play the largest role, because if you have a welcoming environment and the students want to be in your classroom and they feel that they can be successful and they have a relationship with you, they're going to want to be in your class. Now, that doesn't work all the time, but that's a big part of it. So it's the proactive side as well as the reactive side, and we still have work to do, and we continue to do it because it does need to get better than what it is.
I would piggyback on that targeted communication that Mr. Hallahan briefly mentioned. During the summer, we worked to delineate the responsibility of who is communicating what. One of the things, as we began to share at the beginning of this presentation about the particulars of attendance and some of the misinformation our family has about what constitutes chronic absenteeism. If I call my student in and I say that they're with me, then it means that we're okay, right? Making sure that our families are aware that the state's definition for chronic absenteeism, what it includes and what it doesn't include. We're tapping into our MTSS teams, as you know, who look at bag data during their 2-week cycle of data review, utilizing our academy offices to send targeted communication to our families. And that targeted communication includes celebrations, as well as awareness of where their students currently stand at the end of each month, in addition to what our dean's offices are doing as well. Here I want to highlight, we didn't put it up here, but because I had a wonderful conversation and check-in with one of our newest family engagement liaisons that we hired at both campuses as well, that are not Spanish speaking, as a part of Strategy 1. She was sharing with me an example of one of the families that she was working with. We have a grandparent raising a grandchild. And it was a comical story, but the effort and amount of information she was able to share with that family on how to access the absenteeism of their grandson, where to go, what the icons look like. She conducted a home visit with our liaisons to show on his computer what the icon is, because some of our families need that detailed amount of support to set the app up, to send the automatic alerts. Some of our parents are awesome and tech savvy, and they can take care of it right away, but some of our families need a little bit more support. So as they're learning how to use technology to their advantage to monitor their students, our family engagement liaisons, and I'm sure Central Khadijah is doing a wonderful job as well. In addition to that, just highlighting also that some of our students, when you talk about chronic absenteeism, their attendance is an issue of their mental health, and just being able, I have to reiterate the partnerships that we have with some of our awesome organizations within this community that provide support to our students at our campus, but then also work with our students off campus as well to provide them supports to be able to come back into the building to access their education.
I think this is one of the last few slides. 9th grade on track. That has held pretty steady over the last few years. I think the biggest thing we're doing here, or biggest things I would want to highlight, are again the work of our MTSS teams at each level, but specifically the freshman level, but also something that I think is great progress is, as Dr. Guzman mentioned, all of us as administrators have alignment in our goals, and we're looking at progress by grade level. So, for example, Natalie Lopez, who's the freshman academy coordinator at Joliet Central, has a goal about attendance specifically for freshmen, as well as freshmen on track. And so she is working with those teachers, and we're looking at this on a more consistent basis, which is also progress, not just through MTSS, but as administrative teams. That's something that I've always felt we could do better, and we've finally gotten to a point where it's not just, as Dr. Huntington said, kind of the autopsy at the end of what was the data, but where are we at now? So I gave you some data about part day absences. So the MTSS teams and the grade level teams are looking at how are we doing now compared to previous years, so that we can again intervene and identify students who need support and need intervention before it's too late and it's the end of the year and that data is already, and again, the data matters, but more importantly, the damage is done for the student, from the student not being there, et cetera. And again, these are all, our programming continues. The summer programming in the 9th grade, we've had Freshman Academy for probably 20 years now, Mr. Tronio. We're getting there, 18. And we just continue to grow with the interventions and the things in the outreach and the programming to get those students connected to school. And we're going to continue to do that. Again, have more students leave there, because we know how important that on-track data is.
I would add the expansion, we mentioned it before, the expansion of our AVID programming within the ninth grade, because that is where we started with actually having an AVID elective. And now a lot of those AVID strategies being utilized within the content areas for English, math, and science at the ninth grade level has been something that will greatly impact, we believe, our ninth grade data.
And then just as sort of next steps, as a reminder, our next steps are really embedded in the continued work with our strategic plan. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but just to lay out some of the action plans that are in progress. 1.4, which is establishing that instructional and academic identity. We presented information at the Opening Institute Day. That's information that our evaluators are working on with our classroom teachers. And so that information we've achieved some of these things, and then we're trying to make sure that we are accountable to those things. And through our walkthroughs in various areas, then that's what we're looking at, what's going on in our classrooms. With 1.5, that's our restorative practices. So going back to building community, as the board knows, we are have about 200 of our teachers involved in recurring professional development associated with restorative practices that is peer-led on school improvement days. And then the staff members and new staff members that didn't go through the training next year, they'll go through it next year. But that is really focused on building and enhancing community within the classroom to engage students, making students feel part of the community, having trusted relationships with their peers as well as their teachers. 2.1, the administrative structure. So we continue to look at that. Again, Mrs. McDonald talked about the addition of a dedicated multilingual director. We have our assistant principals positions. That is really, we talk about it all the time, that there's a focus on things that we weren't able to have a focus on because of capacity issues. Time is finite. So really having a focus, they're coming over here, meeting with Diane and her team. So there's just a lot of amazing work being done, and we're excited about that, as well as our additional activities and athletic assistant directors that will be posting those positions that the board already approved, because of focus on engagement and activities in athletics, what brings kids to school along with their academic success. So I won't go through all of these, but they were already mentioned. But the continued work on our strategic plan will continue doing our report outs. You're going to see recommendations coming. This is the time of year where you start seeing recommendations for staffing for the next year and for programs. So we will be bringing those things forward, and we're happy to answer any and all questions.
I have some. I feel like this presentation should have been like the movie Kill Bill, where it should have been split up because there's so much stuff.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's kind of zipped through. The 51% absent, which is going way back, do we know what percentage is from kids that are expelled or, out of the school for that reason?
For the expulsions tied to
Well, yeah, Mrs. Huntington
So if we're
asked.
just talking about expulsions from last year, again, I may be a little off, but I believe we had 15 expulsions last year, which is the lowest we've had in 25
So that percentage wouldn't have changed a boatload?
Probably
Maybe
not.
one or
No,
two?
and we do know that our days, if we're just looking at days of out-of-school suspension overall, we have been able to decrease those slightly each year because that is something that we've measured.
Right.
With that being said, different kids have different days of out-of-school suspension. So one student could have, to Dr. Huntington's point, one student could have a more suspension days that lead them to be chronically absent than another student, because maybe one student has 1 day of exclusionary discipline and another student could have 9.
Right.
But those would be added to the other reasons that kids miss school.
The other question was when you were saying about getting the testing and that we needed, what, 92%
95.
or 95? I didn't hear what percentage we made it to.
We were almost at 98 and 99% for last year, which is probably the highest participation rate at both schools we've had in a long time.
So we weren't penalized.
We were not penalized this year, and both the principals and their teams did an outstanding job, because with students not coming to school all the time, you do have to track down those kids to take the test.
So what would the penalty have been? Because it was pretty low on math and science.
Since we don't have a penalty, like, they wouldn't know what it is because we're not on penalty, if I am correct? Okay.
I
We're
wouldn't
not
know how
on
to
penalty.
answer that question.
Okay.
I can tell you how
Well-
we calculate is because we met the percentage, the target, the multiplier is 100%. So they multiply. But if you don't make that target, then they bring it down to 90.93. So the multiplier is not a 1. They reduce the multiplier to get your overall, it's their system of how they calculate points towards your summative. So you lose out.
So the 13 and 6 was still bad. It just might have been worse if they didn't get the 95.
13 and 6 what?
Math.
Proficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct, it would have been a different multiplier.
It would have been less, okay. All right. And the graduation rate is, I think it's terrible for the state of Illinois, and it's certainly a whole lot worse for us. I don't know.
Just though, to combat that a little bit, one of our belief statements with our strategic plan is students learn at different rates at different times. And so I want to bring us all back to meeting kids where they're at. So we have them for 4 years, and kids come into school, even the ones we have for 4 years come into school where they're at, and we meet them, and they may have deficiencies. So one thing I think it's very important for all of us to do is to ensure we're not villainizing our students and or our teachers, because they are doing an outstanding job. And I want to go back to what I said. I'm a proud parent of recent graduates from both schools. And so I really want us to be careful and thoughtful about the language we use when we're talking about our schools, because we're gonna own our data, but I would never say anything is terrible based on what the needs of our students are and where they come in at. And we can do more presentations on that, but all of that has to be taken into account, if that makes sense. I just think it's very important to be very careful, because we do harm to students when we use language in certain ways.
Well, that's true. But like I said, the state percentage is not very good in my opinion. So I'm not just saying it's Joliet here.
I think.
You know what I'm saying? Seriously.
No,
I'm not
absolutely.
saying that it's just us, because I looked at other school districts. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we need to take into account is what are the expectations of students, like throughout Illinois too. And I think these are good changes, so I want to be very careful. And Emily and I both said 18 because we started in the freshman academy the same year at Joliet Central. When we started teaching, kids were able to graduate from Joliet Central and Joliet West with consumer math and what was the other one? It wasn't even algebra. It wasn't even pre-algebra. And so over the last, decade, 15 years, students now have to graduate with advanced algebra. And I was just doing some comparisons, and I'm not going to say who I was comparing us to or not, but similar demographics. And our graduation rate is lower, but our proficiency rate is higher. So I think one of the things that we're always looking at is what do students need to demonstrate in order to prove that basic level of mastery to move on to the next subject, to be successful. Because graduating with Algebra 2 or advanced algebra is a lot different than taking pre-algebra or Algebra 1 or stopping at geometry. And so our kids have to do that. Also, one of the things at Joliet Township, when we talk about science, they didn't used to, but they could take ecology, and I taught that. So ecology was the class that kids took when they didn't pass biology. or physical science or earth science. Now to graduate, they need to take biology and physics, and we have a lot of students that go on into chemistry. You've seen our AP data that continues to grow. So I think one of the things that we should all be proud of is we have programs that we're working on to enhance that benefit every type of student in our system. And because we're focused on all the different types of students. But at the same time, we have a lot of kids that are coming into high school or transferring in that have significant gaps in their education, where maybe they've been out of school or they have deficiencies, and we're still working with those kids. And we want to make sure that they feel welcomed and that they don't feel like they're less than. And so that's something that we're always working on, and our teachers do a great job with that. Any other questions? So then we will do a additional presentation next semester where we look at our attendance, and then we'll also do that presentation where we look at how our students are progressing that we talked about. So we'll bring that feedback, and if there's any other additional questions, we'll answer them at that time. Thank you. Thank you. Our last report is our fall housing report, and it's in your packet. There is not an associated presentation, but Mrs. McDonald will be happy to answer any and all questions. But we're pretty stable. Thank you. No questions? Then that concludes our superintendent reports.
All right, moving on to action items. We have action item A. We're going to have to do a public hearing for attendance on Abe Lincoln's birthday. Being that we are the land of Lincoln, we are supposed to take the day off. However, most schools observe President's Day. So I will need a motion to open a public hearing for having attendance on Lincoln's birthday.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namera?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
All right, now we open the floor to questions or comments from the public about why we are going to observe President's Day over Abraham Lincoln's birthday, or anyone on the board for that matter. Seeing or hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close our hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namera?
Yes.
Public hearing is closed. Moving on to action item B, approval of 25-26 SIP program committee recommendations. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, do we have discussion?
I was unable to attend the second meeting, and I apologize for that. I was able to get a doctor's appointment for a back injury.
Okay.
But I know that it was talked about, and I don't think that there's been any resolution. I have a lot of concern with 70% of the students being on free or reduced lunch, not getting lunch on one of the days. So out of 11 days, they're only getting a lunch on one, they're not getting lunch one of the days. So I'm just wondering how we can address that through either SAC lunches or optional lunch in the room of advisory, somehow, some way to ensure that kids are getting fed every day.
So I can answer some of those questions. I co-facilitated the school improvement committee with Emily Petronio. It is it's an agreed upon committee that's in our contract, and I say thank you, Dr. Huntington, for attending. And that was not just brought up by Dr. Huntington, it was brought up by several other teachers. I did some investigation and just working with Islandis and his team to better understand the requirements and guidelines for lunch. So one of the things we learned is that students have to eat on site. So having the requirements for our breakfast and lunch program, students have to eat on site, and they have to scan. So like they scan their IDs to get their food. That's how we keep track, and we report back to the federal government for the program. Another thing is that, so those were the two things. Just for clarification, on every day, whether it's a SIP day or not a SIP day, all our students have the ability to have breakfast. And our breakfast, they do stay open past the 8:20 for students that may have late buses. So all students have the opportunity to have breakfast. On school improvement days, we run, and this came from recommendations of the committee, so that the union created committee, that on A periods, students that have an A lunch would get lunch, and then if you had an A advisory, you would go to your advisory. So because of the requirements about scanning their food, having them eat in their advisory wouldn't work, because they have, but the time they would get the food and go back to advisory, that would be a limitation. Also, Eileen, if there's anything else. So we looked at that. I even mapped out a potential schedule where we would potentially serve lunch on school improvement days, but that completely eliminates then our ability to have job-embedded professional development and have those 2 hours dedicated to our teachers, and that's value time. And just to give everybody context too of this committee, the old SIP committee, or the old time, like the previous SIP days, we didn't provide lunch on one of the days. So one day was a 4-3-2-1, and no one got lunch. And then on the other SIP day was a 5-6-7-8, and everybody got lunch. So the workings of this committee, that was never brought up. I also reached out to Troy Middle School in District 86, because they also have SIP committees, and they're part of our community. So I want to make sure that we're not doing something that they are. So Troy does not provide lunch on SIP days. The students go home and they eat lunch. And then District 86, it's a little different. Their whole district is free and reduced. So they don't have lunch, but it looks like they give the kids snacks. So it says yogurt and crackers on the menu. So I think they have different rules because their school.
CEP.
Yeah, so I'll turn that over to Eileen with the rules.
No, you're correct. That's, they're CEP, so they're essentially considered 100% free. So in that case, there is no, where you have to determine if someone is free, reduced, or paid. So for us, we're not 100%. So based on the guidelines, whenever we have lunch, you have to determine which basically buckets that students fall in as reported to the federal government. And I know, Diane, we talked about this, we talked to Brian Shaw about this also. This is also a committee that's negotiated through our contract with the teachers. And I think we have to have further discussion on potentially what that may look like if we have some drastic changes. And I think that's a discussion that's going to be in more detail than what the school improvement committee can do. I think it needs to be more in depth in terms of what's that going to mean and how that's going to impact the school. Some districts have full-day school improvement days and no students come to school at all. So, I mean, we have to have just different type of conversations about how do we provide these opportunities if we want our teachers, and it's not just our teachers. We have our paras, we have our office staff, we have our transportation staff. Everyone now takes advantage of this school improvement time for professional development. So we have to have the professional development with all of these initiatives that we're talking about. How do we accomplish that, right? So, if we want to do some of these things that's being suggested, we just need to have a more in-depth conversation about what these options really are.
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to suggest, I'm not suggesting that the teachers don't need and deserve the school improvement time. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that if we can't provide them lunch because of a governmental program, then what other funding sources would we have to provide kids that need something to eat, something to eat?
Yeah, so the only thing that we could try, and we've talked about this, is to pilot after the day is over, how many students may stay. Because again, they have to stay for lunch. Even if we were to pay for it, the state and federal government doesn't allow us to step outside the boundaries of what this program is, right? So that's something we've talked about, is maybe we can start to even pilot that this year. But there's an impact to that, because now we need to have security staff there, we need to have cafeteria staff there. I'm just
Yes, but
speaking to.
what if you put together a meal that's a grab-and-go meal? They pick it up at breakfast.
We cannot do grab and goes like that. We can't do grab and goes like that. So it's breakfast, and then truly supposed to wait 2 hours before you even serve lunch. So we're right there in that realm, especially when we start to talk about school improvement days. So it has to be a 2-hour interval that you're talking about in terms of before we can even start to, whatever you're gonna serve, right? So there's only a short period of time. We even talked about, well, is school improvement days only for those periods where it's lunch periods? But then, there's gonna be, 10 days, 12 days where, teachers don't get to see certain students. So that's what I'm saying, it's a much larger conversation that we need to bring to the table. I think it's something we do need to discuss, but there's just so many other things that could be impacted when we talk about that. We talked about.
Yeah, I guess I just think that, just because it's hard.
I'm not saying that it's
Right.
hard. I'm saying it just needs to be discussed more in depth so that we have the full picture of how everything's going to be impacted. Even with the pilot program that we're talking about to extend, let's say after, school is out. So now we're going to need security, we're going to need office staff, not office staff, we're going to need cafeteria staff, which obviously is additional dollars for cafeteria staff. But now security doesn't have their opportunities for their professional development, right? So I'm just saying it's just a much larger conversation in terms of what this solution is going to be. Not to say that we can or can't do it, I'm just saying that it's just a larger conversation.
And we could also survey students to see how many would stay after school potentially, if that's part of the discussion. I do want to give a little bit of history. When I think Emily and I.
You guys were the original committee.
So, and I believe Mr. Kennedy was on that team too. When we had this committee, and again, this is my recollection of the discussion, we had the discussion because the way that it used to be, we knew that not everyone was getting lunch on every day. So we had the discussion, we just not serve lunch to anybody, because when you're ending breakfast at 8:20, and kids are getting out at 11:45. And so do we just not have lunch available to anyone?
Because we flipped it, right? It was late start.
It was late
We
start.
flipped it to
Yes.
early dismissal.
Yes, and so we talked about, well, it'd be better to be able to serve lunch to half the students and the A and B day than not any of the students. That was part of the discussion, so that's where this ended up. We could survey students. I will tell you, I haven't gotten any complaints about this. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't exist and everything, but I haven't gotten complaints about this particular one ever. And so we'd have to just see where kids are at, because I don't know how many kids would stay after school to get lunch, even if we were doing the supervision in that. That's something we could absolutely survey for the future to see what the desire would be, for kids. So that's another piece, because I don't know that information. And we could go from there, but we've tried to look at different schedules, because and we worked on different schedules, but there's no way within that timeline to serve lunch in the cafeteria with the number of students we have in the amount of time. There's not enough way to supervise and to do it. If anybody has an idea of how we can do that totally open to it, because we looked, and Emily's shaking her head, we looked at a lot of different configurations. So that's just a little bit more history too.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namera?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
No.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Motion passes. On to action item C, approval of 2025-26 school calendar. Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right, any discussion?
I just want to share, as always, the calendar was shared for input with the union leadership. Also, I share it with our sender schools, just to get some feedback, so they even already have it, and they know that it's going to the board tonight, and I will confirm that. But we try to make sure we get input from all the people that it is affecting.
Well, that's good, because I know a lot of times too, our older kids end up helping watch some of the younger kids, so the more we can kind of line that up, the better, so that's good. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namera?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item D, agreement between Joliet Township High School and Able Space. Motion to approve.
So move.
Discussion.
Just giving everybody an update. This is a progress monitoring tool that is being proposed to be used with our ABAC and transition programs. And I do believe they use it at Cheney Mungie.
They do.
Yeah.
That was, our special ed coordinator, Ms. Gibson, actually was able to help out with Ms. Cage with this.
So it really lends itself to the needs of this, like just the goals related to these two programs. So the memo's in there, but they're gonna work with getting this set up into the rest of the school year, pilot it second semester, and hopefully roll it out for 25-26.
Awesome. Awesome. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namera?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes. Motion passes. Action item E, agreement between Joliet Township High School and Sunbelt Staffing LLC. A motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just, we are in need of psychologists, and our Director of Special Services, Jamila Cage, and her team are going to contract with this company because of the shortage that we're experiencing right now.
Is it like due to leaves, or
It's
is
due
there
to
an
a leave.
opening? It's due to a leave,
Yep.
okay.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namera?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item F, agreement between Joliet Township High School and IATSE Stang Hands
It
Local.
should be stage hands. I
Stage,
apologize.
stage hands. That's why
I
I was
just saw it.
very confused. All right, Stage Hands Local 124.
Sorry.
That's okay. I looked at it 5 times.
Yeah,
or
I'm sure
maybe
we
500.
actually all looked at it. We get this ahead of time, but yeah. When you're reading it verbatim on the microphone is always when it's going to come out, Stang Hands. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
This is reaffirming a previous relationship with the Stagehands Union to help support productions, really more outside productions. This wouldn't be a forced use by the community, but it would be an option. As you know, we've updated our auditoriums at both schools with new systems. So it is nice to have this as an option with people who are trained on using the equipment in the right way, because while our staff is able at times to help out for pay, of course, sometimes their time doesn't permit it. And so this is just a good opportunity to have that relationship in place. We went back and forth, and so we're excited to reaffirm this relationship.
Fantastic. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item G, intergovernmental agreement with Joliet Township High School and the School Association for Special Education in DuPage County. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Abstain due to a potential conflict?
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item H, ISB's discipline improvement plan. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, and so there's 3 different areas that you can be cited for a district improvement plan. So JTHS was identified as being in the top 20% for the use of out-of-school suspension. We were not cited for expulsion rate or racial disproportionality. So that's good news. For school suspensions, I actually think when I was looking at the data and working on the just sorting, I think we were right there at the cusp. But we continue to monitor this. But again, we've been able to decrease our days out, but the incidents,
Are
you
the
know,
incidents.
the incidents are the incidents. And so for fighting for, you know, some of the more significant and severe, we're going to continue to work with students. And so again, I don't know how much more this is going to lower, and it's dependent on the year. We see different trends each year, but our staff is working hard. The presentation that is associated with this was the presentation you saw in July. That will continue to be an annual presentation with our interventions and our groups. You heard about our support staff, so happy to answer any questions. But this is a requirement for the state, so upon approval of this plan and the minutes next month, we will submit it to the state to meet the deadline.
So what's the frequency of monitoring of this plan? Is it annual?
It's annual.
Annual.
I get it every year on Halloween. I don't know why that is. Scary.
End of the month, probably.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item I, after-school tutoring job description. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Discussion?
I already shared this earlier. Happy to answer any questions.
Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item J, course additions. We have Applied Engineering Technology, AP Calculus, BC, and Avid Elective. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Discussion?
I just want to share how excited I am to have Calculus BC come to the Board of Education. That is very, very exciting, and one of the reasons, and Diane, if you need to add anything, but we have current juniors in our highest level calculus class, and we absolutely have to be able to continue their math sequence while in high school. So it will start off with a smaller class, but this is really exciting, and I think this is just attributed to the work that Mrs. McMorris is doing with our sender schools as well as our math teachers. And so we're going to continue, and I hope I get to see at some point Calc 3. But I'm really excited about BC.
Will it be run at both campuses next year?
We have students, correct, as juniors at both campuses. Yes, and so we'll see that through the staffing reports, and that would be an example of most likely low
Small,
enrollment
yeah.
classes. But we really
You wouldn't
don't-
want to travel those kids unless,
kids don't travel,
We actually
even when we offer
looked
it.
into teaching A, B, and BC in the same class. So we reached out to the College Board and some other schools that have done it with low enrollment. So that is a possibility as well, and our teachers are looking into that. So that is another backup for our.
But for the first time you want to run it, you want to double down, I would probably rather just get the FTE for it, you know.
Well, then I'll be bringing that to the board.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you want to make sure that it's a
Twist
positive
her arm,
experience
right?
the
Yeah,
first
just-
time. You don't want to be trying to teach 2 advanced classes at the same time.
But I mean, this really is
Understood.
exciting, and something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And then again, the Applied Engineering Technology Program, with JJC, that's exciting too, expanding opportunities for our kids. I was in multiple, meetings today with the manufacturing group, and this is such a need in our area and these different programs, and this is really helpful to our kids.
Awesome. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir? Yes. Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
All right, motion passes on to action item K, approval of the 23-24 annual financial report. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Discussion.
Congratulations again, Dr. Hampton, to you and your team.
Well done.
4.0.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know, I just entered 3.9 into the compliance, so next year I'll get to enter 4.0. That's exciting.
Fantastic work. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, motion passes. Action item L, approval of 2024 tentative tax levy. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Eating a-
Second, sorry.
That's all right. Any discussion? Further than what Dr. Hampton gave us, it was a pretty good presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
No.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Motion passes. Action item M, donations. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, thank you. We would just like to thank everyone that donates to Joliet Township High School, and this time including BNA Healthcare, Amazon Business for Education, Salon David Anthony, and our good friend Rosie Cardenas with Darcy Auto.
Awesome. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
All right, on to action item N and the novel that I'm about to read. Discussion and action on proposed Illinois Association of School Boards resolutions for consideration at the 2024 ISB Delegation Assembly and appointment of Joliet Township High School 204 delegate to the 2024 ISB Delegate Assembly. Long story short, there are 10 resolutions that are being reviewed for, to be taken to the General Assembly. There are 6 of them that are due adopt from the ISB Resolutions Committee, and then there are 4 of them they say do not adopt. Based on, consensus at this point, I would say that we entertain a motion to go with the ISB recommendation for 1 through 6, 8, and 9, if we can get a motion for that.
So moved?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
That was quick. Can I just add one thing? Thank you very much to our own board member, Chrissy Lynn, for bringing forward the one on criminal background checks. We appreciate that. Not there yet.
We're not.
Oh. I just wanted to say that.
1 through 6 and 8 through 9.
Yes, 1 through 6, and then 8 and 9, and then we'll vote on 7 and 10 separately.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yep.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Namir?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Excuse
All
me,
right.
sorry.
Motion passes, so Ms. Lynn will be going with the ISB recommendation at that point, but now we will open it for 7. We would need a motion to approve 7, which is cell phone usage.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do we have discussion? Ms. Lynn, you want to take it away for us?
Basically, this resolution gives the local power that gives school the authority to make their own rules and regulations on cell phones and doesn't have to go through the state to get those recommendations or to pass any rules and regulations about cell phones.
Okay. So for our roll call vote, I think it would probably be easiest. They're telling us not to adopt, so it may just, if we want to respond as adopt or do not adopt, would probably be the easiest and most obvious way for us to give guidance.
Yes.
So when your name is called, you're either say adopt, which goes against their guidance, but you think that it's good for the districts, or you say do not adopt based on the information Ms. Lynn gave. Does that make sense? So instead of yes or no, you just say, we want to adopt it. Right now, they're saying do not adopt it, but if you think that it's a good cell phone usage, we want to give, you know, what was in the packet. So roll call, please.
Dr. Huntington.
Adopt.
Mr. Coffey.
Adopt.
Mrs. Stiff.
Adopt.
Mr. Kennedy.
Adopt.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Adopt.
Mrs. Lynn.
Adopt.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer.
Adopt.
All right, motion passes. Now on to 10, and as stated previously, this was actually brought forth by Ms. Lynn, our own board member. So again, we need a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Okay, and now discussion. Do you have anything you want to, I mean, we've already voted on this, I believe.
Yes, there's nothing, we're not actually allowed to add anything to it. We have to vote on it exactly as it was proposed. And I will be making a 5-minute speech to the delegates before I bring it forth for their adoption also.
Okay, all right, then I would say we do the same, adopt, do not adopt. So does anyone else have further discussion before we move to roll call? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer.
Adopt.
Dr. Huntington.
Adopt.
Mr. Coffey.
Do not adopt.
Mrs. Stiff.
Adopt.
Mr. Kennedy.
Adopt.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Do not adopt.
Mrs. Lynn.
Adopt.
All right, motion passes. Now moving on to action item O, discussion and action of proposed Illinois Association School Board constitutional amendment for consideration at the 2024 ISB Delegate Assembly. I'm going to go through this one, or you got that one too, Ms. Lynn?
I looked over it, and it's basically changing the wording of the IASB Constitution. And before it said, common practice will be decided according to Robert's rules, and then because Robert's rules changed, they want to give a little more leeway to, follow past practices. And so basically, they want to follow the rules to have a little bit of wiggle room as long as it follows a compliance with federal, state, and local laws.
Okay. So we will just vote yes or no to whether or not we want them to go with the amendment or not. All right, any other further discussion? Any questions for Ms. Lynn based on that? I know we all got it and read it. All right, roll call.
I need a motion.
Oh, I thought we had a motion.
No.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun on discussion. Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. We already did the discussion portions. Let's move straight to roll call. It is past my bedtime.
I was going to say, does this meet the Robert's Rules muster?
No, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
Be okay with this?
Mrs. Lynn.
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer.
Yes.
Dr. Huntington.
Yes.
Mr. Coffey.
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
No.
All right. Action item P, personnel reports, 1 through 10. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
No.
Mrs. Lynn.
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer.
Yes.
Dr. Huntington.
Yes.
Mr. Coffey.
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, motion passes. By unanimous consent, I say we skip over Q as there is no student discipline recommendations. Hearing no objection, we move to R, S, and T, and I will move that over to Mr. Coffey.
Yes, for action item R, I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing notice to remedy and suspension of Kristen Coppers for the reasons discussed in closed session.
We need a second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Nomer?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to action item S, I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing notice of charges and dismissal of Daniel Marcoon for the reasons discussed in closed session.
Second.
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
No.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Nomer?
Yes.
Dr. Huntington?
No.
All right, motion passes.
Moving on to action item T, I make a motion to approve the censure of Board Member Thomas Fitzpatrick for the reasons set forth in the resolution.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
I'd like to speak. Is that possible?
Yeah, we have discussion.
A supposed email was sent from a teacher, which is Dan, from his work email to his personal, stating that the vote was 4-4 and 3 against, which was not sent to me, and I knew nothing about it. There was no investigation for the censor, no vote prior to this for the censor. It's really nothing more than another way for the board to try to decimate my character, my good name that I've spent my whole life building up. Just like Dan and I, we are the pillars of this community, and we are not being fairly treated.
Thank you.
I have something to say.
Okay.
Each member of the school board makes an oath when elected, and recently I have been reflecting on this specific section. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board, while respecting the privacy of students and employees. When I made this oath, I took a moment to let those words resonate within me. They are not just words, they are actions and decisions that I make on behalf of our children that can have lasting effects, and therefore I do not take this responsibility lightly. As board members, we occasionally face tough situations where well thought-out dialogue needs to occur so informed, evidence-based decisions can be made. There are 7 members on this board who all offer unique perspectives when analyzing data and evidence. We rely on each other for guidance, insight, trust, support, and accountability. Trust and decorum are needed to freely express our diverse sets of opinions. Our commitments to mutual respect and confidentiality allows us free expression of opinion and ensures that we can weigh all options when those difficult decisions arise. I respect our union and the work that they do for our staff, and in return, they have a right to expect that we will honor this oath and protect their members' confidential information. Members of our staff who are not union members, such as administration, also deserve the same treatment. I admire the hard work and dedication of each staff member, and we cannot do any of this without you. We are all here for one reason, and that is to protect and educate our most vulnerable population in this community, and that's our children. Not only does every decision we make need to be in the best interest of them, we also need to keep in mind the welfare of students in nearby communities in mind. The community has chosen us to uphold this oath, and we make sure that all members of this board also take this oath seriously. It is my honor and duty to make sure that I do not let the community down with this privilege of serving them and their children without fear or favor.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Huntington?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
No.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Nomer?
Yes.
Motion passes. That finishes action items for us. Moving on to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Do we have any new business other than the several policies?
We do. we have the several policies. So you also received a summary of the changes. They're minimal in nature. This is first read. They will be brought back to the board in December for second read. The only thing, and for action, the only thing I wanted to point out is all of the complaint manager changes that we made will be made on these policies. We just didn't get them in time to make those changes because we have to wait for those other changes to occur in the other policies. So that, those changes will occur.
All right. Do we have any other new business? Let's move on to board reports. Anyone with a board report?
I've had to miss the last meeting for the discipline committee, so I apologize. My daughter was not feeling well, and then unfortunately, again, I'm gonna have to miss this Thursday. So I do not have any reports on that committee, but hopefully, well, if they get the work done, we don't need another meeting, so I'm not gonna say hopefully they get the work done.
Okay.
And we don't need another one.
I attended the community fair at Joliet Central.
Nice.
I left with several resources for my own student, especially with the RTA and the disability pass for the RTA. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
I also had an opportunity to talk to Guardian Angel, and they're now providing programs at another school down the street. So I just think it was a really great opportunity to talk to people, get to talk to kids. I did get to meet the new family liaisons. It was very nice. And it was just a really, I wish I could have stayed longer, but I made sure to hit a lot of the booths while I was there.
Nice.
I also attended that event, but just this past Friday, JTHS CEO had a breakfast, and I am just in awe of those students and what Mr. Visser is doing with them. And if you haven't heard them in their presentation and what they're doing this semester, what they're gonna do next semester, you should probably try to seek that information. They also attended USF this morning at a presentation, and I was there as well, and a couple of the students are ambassadors.
Oh, nice.
So they've had a long day.
Yeah, they have. Sounds like.
And I just want to thank our superintendent and the board, the advisory board, the staff that's embraced this program and is moving it forward, because our students are getting a wealth of knowledge and experience by being a part of it.
I just want to say you can get really cool Steelman gear. I did at the Community Connections Fair too. I spent a little bit too much money, but it was really cool. And again, everybody was there. That was awesome. Also, just of all of the things our staff do every day, I reached out because a parent asked me, they couldn't afford their cap and gown. And like within 24 hours, which I didn't even get to say thank you to everybody, Joliet Central had it all figured out with, and just, that's one little student. All the students they help every day, and just think about the kids that graduate that have so many needs every day. And I just want to say thank you for every single thing you do every day for all of our kids.
Can I just say one thing about that? We're able to do that because of the JTHS Foundation. So I just want to make note of that, the generosity of the foundation at both campuses. They give us emergency funds to help students in need. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge them for giving us that.
So for those at home listening, that is funded, is provided by the JTHS Foundation. Is that correct, Mr. Hallian? Yep. Just want to make sure everybody got that information, because they do deserve a lot of credit for that. They do a lot of work for our kids.
And yeah, I was gonna say, they just gave a bunch of like mini grants and grants away this past week, and so we appreciate JTHS Foundation for that as well.
And I know Mr. Turk is looking for volunteers for the foundation.
Website and social media.
Yep, website and social media needs, right, Diane?
If you're good at that.
Yep.
All right, that's for anyone listening at home,
We
if you're good at
also
that.
need help running our trivia event and our golf outing event. So I will be posting stuff on our internal web, but since I have the microphone right now, I will broadcast that the JTH Foundation has very dedicated leadership, the executive board, but our participation on the foundation has really dwindled to the point where we're unsure if we're actually going to be able to run the trivia event or the golf outing because of just the capacity of our board. They do oversee scholarships, they oversee the principal's emergency funds, but the conversation was had that even with the mini grants, they're at a capacity right now of fundraising, and it's a lot of work, and we need people to join both the athletic booster, who supports the clubs and activities, and then the foundation, which is really heavy in supporting the academics. So I'll turn the mic off now.
So do you have to join, or can you just volunteer for an event?
volunteer.
So instead of just dressing up, like show up and help out,
Yeah, like
Just be there.
organizing the raffles, organizing the baskets, the 50-50. If you're good with sign making.
I can make signs.
You can make signs, but yes.
There you go.
There's a lot of people in this community that graduated from our high schools, and we would love to have them participate on the foundation and also be part of these events.
Okay.
She doesn't want me.
I do.
Graduated. I graduated.
Well, she thinks you're already volunteering, but everybody else too. Everybody else too.
It was a lot. I would never ask before the board to do anything more.
I would like to say that I have been on the board for 20 months, and I do apologize to the parents and children of staff, because as the Illinois report card has shown, it is lacking. And I will only speak for myself that I've only begun the fight for it. And I feel like the administration is doing what they can, but it falls short every year. The presentation today was very similar to last year's, and the scores are the same. So I don't know what else I can say.
I will say I also went to the community expo and brought some stuff over to my school. The Hidden in Plain Sight trailer was something that was fantastic. It was very eye-opening as a parent. And I was able to, on short notice, get them to come to our parent-teacher conferences a week or so later, and our parents were floored. So it is something that we actually want to make kind of a yearly thing during parent-teacher conferences to keep those parents involved. Because my kids feed into Lockport, and so it is kind of hard sometimes for them to get across the bridge. So our community has a little bit lower ability to transport families at times, and so it was nice to get that into the community. And actually had a lot of former students, their parents reach out and say, can we come even though they don't go to school there anymore? So absolutely, it's part of the community. So that was nice. And then I was able to attend the Veterans Day Assembly. Because of our parent-teacher conference, we end up with that Friday off most years. And it is one of my favorite things to attend. It was one of my favorite things when I was teaching at Central. And I hope that Major Jaco is going to come back and do Duty, Honor, Country, because it gives me goosebumps every time that he does it. I know there was a list of members at Central who have served, and I want to reiterate the thank you to the service to them. And for anyone else who is in our district that has served, thank you so much. I can't even begin to put into words how much I appreciate that service. So.
I just wanted to share that me, along with other members of our team, we were able to attend the Active Threat and Mental Wellness Conference that was planned and implemented by the Joliet Fire Department. Christine was there, Ed was there. The panelists and the information were just amazing. They did a fantastic job, and I appreciate them pointing us out, Joliet Township, several times as being great partners and getting information out to the community. And so it was a really great event. I would encourage, if you can in the future, to potentially attend, because my understanding was they had different presenters, but along the same, they had survivors of mass shootings and tell their story, and it was a lot, but it was very good. They did a great job. I also want to share the pilot that we did with the CED for internships. If you remember, we were able to place 39 students last year. I'm on the expansion committee, and we met this morning, and there's currently 145 positions.
Wow.
Those come from 59 employers. It has expanded to other areas, but I will tell you that the majority of the positions are in Joliet. And so we're starting to work on a plan with our students to make sure they're ready for those. But that's very exciting. I plan to continue to be part of that committee, but very proud of Joliet for help leading the way with that. And I know other schools, including Lockport and Valley View, are part of the group moving forward.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so exciting for our kids.
All right. Is that it for board reports? Anybody else? We'll move on to announcements and public comment. Is there any, Ms. Rico?
Yes, we have public comment.
All right. We'll have the first person come forward.
Sure. Mr. Dan Lynn.
Yep, and just make sure you press the button so that it goes green. You'll have 3 minutes. Keep your comments addressed to the board. As my former buddy, Mr. Edmond, used to say, this is a meeting in the public, not with the public. So you talk to us, we don't respond to you, but if you need a response, that'll be facilitated through our superintendent. So
Okay, very good.
have at it.
Is this good? Here.
Mhm.
Check, 1, 2. Hello, board. My name is Daniel Lynn. I'm a proud Joliet community member and the proud husband of one of your fellow board members, Christine Lynn. I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to speak today for the hard work done in service to the school and community. Just as a fun side note, our daughter's a freshman here at West this year, marking the 3rd straight generation of proud Joliet school students in her family. Chrissy's father was a freshman at Joliet West's first class in 1964, marking a 60-year difference between 3 generations. I'd also like to thank Dr. Guzman and the principals. That was a very impressive presentation. It's inspiring to see how much you investigate and look into the things to foster the different groups of students for better outcomes. It's very cool. I apologize if I'm a little shaky. We were excited when Chrissy was elected because for both of us, a sense of duty to the community has become a part of our identities. We've had many people in our families who have served the community in various ways. Chrissy was elected to the board in 2021 and has expressed her joy and honor of serving the school district since. That was the pandemic era when many were on edge from the confusing state of the world. Simple disagreements led to altercations, politicians were accosted at work and at their homes across the country. People were cornered, targeted, harassed, and made to feel unsafe in their communities and around their homes for simply doing their jobs. These types of intimidation and harassment have no home anywhere. That is the focus of my address here today. It seemed that those incidents of harassment had subsided, but more recently, Chrissy had expressed concerns for her safety, so much so that we installed security cameras on her home, and she asked me to escort her places occasionally. Now, this may seem like an overreaction to some, but a simple internet search will reveal that almost half of the U.S. states have had news stories of school board members being harassed, both from the public and even among members. A board member's job is to serve the community, the students, the faculty, the administration, and various other stakeholders. And since they are not paid, as you've mentioned, and volunteer their time for these efforts, these board members serve out of a sense of duty. The pay you receive is seeing your work benefit the students, creating better environments for them, improving their educational experience, their future, and most importantly, their safety. So having to address such issues as interpersonal harassment or intimidation only serves to distract from performing the best job possible for the most important stakeholders, the students. I'm speaking today to highlight these issues and remind the board and the community that civil discourse is a fundamental ingredient in promoting healthy environments where all can thrive. I noted on the agenda items there were a couple mentions of accountability, and I appreciated seeing that. That's what prompted me to address the board today. I want to thank the board for having a system of checks and balances where concerns can be addressed and discussed and solutions can be reached. These measures signal that the board takes transparency very seriously as a way to foster public trust. It says that the board is not only accountable to the community but also to itself. That if it experiences issues that deserve attention, it will honestly and openly discuss them where appropriate, exhibiting duty with humility. That no entity is any greater than another, that we're all equal players. So again, thank you for having those checks and balances in place. I've seen the fruits of the board's labors and I'm proud of this school board. The Joliet West Stadium looks beautiful, and that cool tiger out there is a crowd favorite. Projects like that make the students proud and give them a strong sense of identity, boosting their educational experiences and their confidence. When they are served best, students can focus on their studies and enjoy their youth. Seeing the board serve the students to such a great degree and also hold themselves to high standards makes this community member very proud. Acts like this improve the faith in the board from the whole community. And when the conversations necessary to fulfill those duties can be had without stress or duress, the board can function efficiently and create the fostering environment the students desire. Again, I'd like to thank each and every board member and everyone here who spoke for their hard work and the opportunity to address my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second?
All right, we'll do this one by unanimous consent. Hearing nobody object, motion passes, and meeting is adjourned.
I took all these notes during open session.
That's why I passed it quick.
I thought so.